Alright everybody, welcome to your ninth AngularJS tutorial and welcome to the controllers tutorial. And controllers, as we have been discussing so far, are kinda interesting thing in Angular, and controllers actually makes up your application in AngularJS. So what are controllers exactly? Now controllers are nothing more than traditional JavaScript objects created with AngularJS. So from our JavaScript tutorial, we know that a simple object is an object literal created with like my object is this thing, and if we do like console log type of my object, then it would obviously return object without any doubt. But AngularJS controllers actually control the data of your application you have written in JavaScript with AngularJS. So you may wonder that somewhere we need to attach this controller to the HTML as well. Well, yes, for that we have got an AngularJS directive called ng controller. Now ng controller gives a unique name to a part of your HTML through which you actually make use of the MVC model of AngularJS. And let's take a quick look at what controllers are and how they work. So to create a basic controller, what we will do is okay, so let's code the HTML first, and let's say I create a div with ng controller. As I told you, we need to assign this a controller to work with JavaScript, and a little bit of spacing here. Let's say in the ng controller I give what do you say, let's say languages. So here what we would write is, let's say select your favorite favorite wow favorite language LAN. Wow, what is happening today? Okay, so select your favorite languages, or maybe just one language, and let's say button, and let's say PHP, then button, JavaScript, button, C++, button, Java, and the list continues. So we have got a bunch of languages here, and down here let's create you have selected, and let's say my favorite language. Now many of you would complain that I haven't used this kind of variable with ng init anywhere in the code, and that's the reason I was telling you that we don't need ng init very much while you're coding Angular. So let's make this on the browser so it looks like kinda doing nothing right now, and let's add some controllers to it. Okay, so controllers, how we code a controller in AngularJS is just like creating a variable in JavaScript. Let's say application, and this should be equal to angular dot module, module. Now Angular is something which comes, this object comes from this file here, so don't ask any question that I haven't declared anything like Angular and its property module. It all comes from this JavaScript file loaded by our script tag here. So angular.module, what this module actually means is, it would take another tutorial to explain what module is, but simply explaining that it kind of creates a module of your application which you are working with. And don't worry, we'll be discussing about Angular modules soon, but let's focus on controllers for now. And in module, we have to give whatever the name of our app is, and currently it's set to blank. So let's give it a name. Let's say my language app, and the same name should be here in the module. And one more thing you have to do, as a second argument you have to give a blank array, and this is because in here you would load the dependencies of your module. So when we are coding like in the 30th or 40th tutorial of AngularJS, then we will be using make use of this dependencies. And what it would do is, like, let's say you have a separate script tag which contains some of your other modules which you have created in Angular, and you want to basically get all of the properties and whatever you did in that module into this module. So we can basically do that by writing like my module here, the name of your module. But currently, since we don't need any module loaded with our AngularJS application, we'll just set this array to blank. Now we have application as an object, and if you do a type of application, you'll get object as logged in, so no need to do that. And now we'll define a controller of this application. So let's type application dot controller, controller, and controller would accept an argument and the name which we supplied here. So languages is our controller, and languages it is. So similarly we would pass another, you can say a function or directly a array. Now I'll be using array, and the reason is that in the first value it would take something called scope. Now let me write the code first, and then I'll explain you what the scope is. So yeah, looks good. So this scope, a $sign and a scope, is inbuilt variable of Angular, and we have to use that. And the reason why I am using a scope here and a scope here as well, and not directly like this thing, is that whenever you are working on production sites, then you usually compress your JavaScript code with softwares available online. And what the softwares do is that they compress and rename all the variables to some different values. So what happens is Angular is always looking for an argument with a variable scope. Now let's say your JavaScript compressor renames this variable to something like this to attackers, so that attackers it is hard to debug for the attackers. So now your AngularJS itself doesn't know what the heck this means. But if you have supplied a argument here with scope in quotes, obviously your compressor won't change this value, so Angular would automatically understand that you are referring scope here. So as long as you are not going to compress your code in Angular, you could use this without any square brackets or anything else. So there's an anonymous function scope, and this controller attaches all the code here to everything inside this controller. So now we have access to whatever we were setting before with ng init. So let's say I write scope dot my favorite language equals, you have selected, for default I would like to have none. So now here on this button I would like something to happen whenever this button or this button or this button is clicked. So far we have, what we have been doing is we have been attaching JavaScript handler, on click, JavaScript alert, like that. But with Angular has got its own event handlers, and we have got ng click. Now this ng-click would kind of run your JavaScript code whenever this button is clicked, and since this is an Angular directive, it would first work on MVC model and would go into your controller, look for anything available, and similarly execute the code. So let's say I give it a function PHP, which we'll be declaring here, and to this button let's just break this down a code a little bit so it's easier to read. Alright, so now in the JavaScript one, let's say I give ng-click as JavaScript. Now notice that these are functions because I am using parentheses to call them. ng-click C++, and finally ng-click should be Java. Alright, so we have defined some of the functions here, and application controller is the first one setting the scope of my favorite language to none. And what does that mean is, I'll show you. Let's reload this page, and okay, so let's take a look here. In the console we have got, alright, so there's a typo here, ANGULAR it should be. Let's reload this. Okay, so I guess I kept them with my code, and let's reload this now, and we have got none here. So we have got some ng-click event handlers here, but nothing defined here. So let's do something here. So let's say scope dot, and starting with PHP, since it's a function, let's say whenever this is called, then scope dot my favorite language should be modified to PHP. And similarly, let's just copy and paste this over and over for JavaScript, C++, and Java. So for, whoa, wait a sec, this should be Java and this should be C++. So this is C++, this is JavaScript, and this is Java. So what we expect now is that when I run it in the browser, then by default I have got you have selected none, but whenever I click on these, you see that the data is automatically modified on the basis of my click. And let me explain this code again from the starting. We have created a controller with div ng-controller languages, written some basic HTML, attached a event handler of ng-click, which is an Angular click directive to every button, created a controller, created a module first, application Angular module my languages app, and set the dependencies to empty. Application defined a controller languages, same as here, and supplied it with a function scope to get and access the view of the MVC model. Then we are setting scope.myFavoriteLanguages to none at the starting. Then we are modifying this to some other values whenever a particular function of this ng-click directive here is called. And that's it. That's pretty much what our application is doing. So that was a very basic and simple example of controllers in AngularJS, and I welcome you all to AngularJS from this tutorial. So that's it for this tutorial in controllers, and we'll be working with controllers a lot harder and pro way in future tutorials. So still then, stay tuned with me, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'll see you then.